Hello. So I'm going to do a video about King Lear. It's not the definitive work. It's my general impressions. So typically, what I do when I read something like Shakespeare is complex and just sort of very thick language. I watch a production of it. There's loads out there on the internet, and then I read it. So I have this. Bought this for £5 at a charity shop. It's amazing to think that you can get this guy's entire life work for £5. Absolute bargain. So anyway, I watch a production, then I read it, and then I watch and read it together simultaneously. Not every production is 100% faithful to the text, and then I watch it. And so and it's helpful to watch maybe a couple different productions if it's available to you. Some of his more obscure plays only have one decent production that's not like a high school class completely butchering it. So yeah, it's like I say, it's totally amazing that you can just have this and read what he wrote, for next to nothing. So anyway, uh, King Lear. I won't bore you with all the whole plot. But essentially, King Lear is retiring. He's 80 years old. He has three daughters. Two of the daughters have husbands who are also nobles. There's the Duke of Cornwall and there's the Duke of Albany. And they're going to be running the kingdom for Lear. Lear is going to stay king, but he just doesn't want any of the responsibility. So he's just going to sort of just roam around the countryside, whooping it up, basically retiring, not having any more responsibility. And essentially, he asks his daughters what they feel about him. The two older ones decide that they're going to flatter the hell out of him. And they're just sort of outdoing each other and praising him and lavishing about how much they love him. And the younger one, who has not been married yet, says that she loves him, but as much as a daughter should, what is appropriate for a daughter. She doesn't lay it on thick. She's completely honest. And he just flies off the handle. Now, part of this is that he has always been a bit of a rageaholic, but he's also an old fool. And, if you've ever been around old people, there's a lot of stuff about age in this, especially how old Lear is. And it's actually kind of painful if you've been in this situation where you've seen somebody just sort of not as sharp as they used to be, and to watch them to be diminished. And whenever a person like this, who is already kind of, angry, when they start to get a little senile, they get angrier, and the smallest things will set them off. This is what happens with Lear, is that he flies off the handle about her, Cordelia, the youngest, not being as over the top as the others, and he kicks her out. And he says to the King of France, if you want her, marry her. I don't care. She's out of my life. You're not getting a penny out of me for a dowry or anything like that. And the King of France is fine with that. And the other two decide that they are going to find a way to get rid of Lear. Either drive him insane, make him commit suicide. You'll see later in the play that they basically just don't give him a place to live, and he starts wandering around outside in a giant storm, completely exposed to the elements. Now, if you look at this, you have to kind of divide the whole world up into two parts, or the whole King Lear world. There's King Lear at the top, who's obviously, I've just talked about him. He's quick to anger, quick to judgment. He wants good things. He's just his compass is out of whack. But you have on the bad side, you have Goneril, who's the eldest daughter, and Regan, who is the middle daughter. They both want to get rid of him. It's obvious they don't love him. They'll do anything to diminish him, to get rid of him, and even put him in harm's way. They want him dead. And you'll see one of the husbands, Cornwall, who's totally into this, and one of the other husbands, Albany, is not into it. But he's kind of a neutral figure where he's not willing to attack the king outright, but obviously he's not all there. And then you have somebody, there's a sort of parallel plot with the Earl of Gloucester, who has two sons. One, Edmund, is a bastard son, so when Gloucester dies, he does not get anything because he's a bastard, and that's just the way the rules were. On the other hand, he has a legitimate son, Edgar, who is, you'll see in the play, a little naive, but definitely a dutiful son. And Edmund is the bastard, is jealous of the fact that he, because of something that happened before he was born, he's been written out of the picture as far as power and all that is concerned. Edmund doesn't like the fact that Edgar is legitimate. So he goes out of his way to basically write a fake letter from Edgar to him saying, let's kill our father. And then he shows it to the father. The father flies off the handle. So we'll put Edmund in the bad category. And we'll put Edgar as grudgingly good. He didn't choose to be good. He just sort of was forced to look out for himself, and eventually he chooses to be good. So you also have this guy, the Earl of Kent, who is Lear's advisor, and he gets thrown out of court because he comes to Cordelia's defense saying, look, you have to beware of your daughters. They are just saying really nice things because you're giving them stuff. And Cordelia is the only one who actually really loves you. So you have Kent over here. Now, in the play, both Edgar and Kent have to disguise themselves. Kent just comes in as some sort of it really depends on the production, but he comes in looking like a monk in one production. He's just kind of, his name is Caius, or the presumed name that he works under is Caius. And Edgar is basically, he is in disguise as some lunatic, like an actual lunatic called Tom. And so anyway, they end up trying to look out for their interests, but around the scene. So Kent comes in and tries to help Lear. And Lear is followed around everywhere by a character called the Fool. Now, the Fool is one of the more interesting characters in there. He's not a big character, but he's essentially the only character in the play who's allowed to say it as he sees it. If you look into the history of the Fool, a court jester or a joker or something like that with this, the little hat, with the little points at the end. Essentially, they were there for entertainment, but you might call them essentially a stand-up comedian, a magician, all kinds of just basically an entertainer. But he has one position or one allowance that nobody else can say. He can actually call the king to his face a fool and an idiot. You're a fool, and he does this continuously, where he basically chides like you're giving your kingdom away for nothing. You're exposing it to civil war. You're blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. And the king accepts it. He might rage at him, but he's not having him put out in chains. He's not doing what he did to his daughter or to the Earl of Kent. And so the fool is getting away with it, but he has to be the fool. He is never going to have any power. He's never going to have any say in anything. He's just only there to tell the king that you have completely fucked up in your life. So anyway, you have these two sides of good and evil. So the good people have to pretend that there's somebody else just because they have a death sentence on their head. Um, and so the good people, like Kent and Edgar, have to hide the fact that they are who they are. Cordelia just goes away to another country. So they're discarded. The good are discarded, and the bad can be just bad out in the open. I mean, like Ronald Reagan just blatantly, everyone's face, treat the king like a child, or even worse than a child that just like, fine, screw you. If you're going to be that way, just there's outside, you can shift for yourself, and that's it. Um, and the thing is that the good people tend to, they have been pissed upon essentially, and the bad people can just get away with it. But you do see in the play that this evil tends to have this quality where as they always say, that evil has this tendency to destroy itself, as well as other people. Anything around it, evil tends to destroy. So, not giving the plot away, but giving the plot away, Goneril poisons her sister because she wants to marry Edmund, even though she does have a husband right there. Then she kills herself later. Oswald, who is Regan's dutiful servant, basically does. He's just a hitman for or a fixer for Regan. He's killed by Edgar. And Edmund, despite of or because of his success, that he goes from a bastard all the way to being the Earl of Gloucester, he gets a little too big for his britches, tries to usurp the Duke of Albany's power, because he's now the last guy standing. And he ends up getting killed by his brother, who comes out, with the, like it's kind of a bit of a, it's a little old hat where Edgar comes out and he's in disguise. He's got this mask as if nobody recognizes his voice or his mannerisms. This is your brother, for God's sake. But that's I guess you have to drive the plot along somehow. And Edgar ends up killing Edmund, getting vengeance for what Edmund had done to him, screwing him over, but also putting his father in a situation where he gets his eyes gouged out by the Duke of Cornwall, and they're basically thrown out into the wilderness. So you see this evil has a tendency not only to destroy itself, but anybody who's around it. And this is something that I think that Shakespeare really touches on, that it's not just, we sometimes look at things as fate. And actually in the first act, Edmund, has this one line in here where he actually talks about about fate, and he basically says, well, I'm not going to bore you offhand, but basically saying, like, people like to assign their will to the stars, as like the stars have decided this. They blame all of their own actions or the actions of others on the moon and the stars, that it was written in the stars, or the heavens, the heavens conspired against me, and things like that. And he doesn't believe in that. So that's kind of an interesting thing, that one of the more interesting philosophical moments is that he actually kind of gets rid of the idea of superstition, yet he pretends to his brother and to his father to be superstitious, maybe just to put on a face. But I would say that one other aspect of this is that you look at political leaders in here. So I'm looking at really King Lear, right? This is the big political leader. The Earl of Gloucester, basically are idiots. I wouldn't call them complete idiots, but they're sort of taken in. They believe nonsense uncritically. So if you look at the very first scene, Lear believes all the flattery that his daughters lay on him thickly. and he believes that, just because Cordelia is slow to produce, very high praises of him, that she's evil. It's a very black and white situation where you don't lay this all on me as thick as possible. You're evil. Get out of my life. Blah, blah, blah. You hate me. Well, he's also that's kind of the way he thinks. You don't know too much about how he behaves other than what you see on screen. You don't actually talk about anything. We have no idea who the mother of these daughters are. Who their mother is. But you get the impression that he's a difficult man to deal with before he's gone insane. And so she gets kicked out of his life because she is not a flatterer, that she is honest about her love for him. Her love for him is diminished when you think about how high that Goneril and Regan have said that they've loved him, that they've said they've done that, that they actually don't actually show it. And that's the difference, is that words and action are, two very different things. And I think that you should probably, when you analyze things and you listen to people when they say things, does this person actually back up what they say on a regular basis? Or are they just trying to win me over to get what they want, and then they'll cast me aside? The nice thing about this play is that you kind of Shakespeare is kind of teaching you how to deal with flatterers, is that don't believe any old crap that anyone says. Is there a deed behind these words? And obviously Lear has to learn this lesson the hard way. Also, Goneril and Regan just kind of placate him. They know what he wants. He wants to be praised. They know how to do it. Obviously, it worked, right? They got what they wanted. They got his kingdom. And once they got what they wanted, they don't, they get rid of their father, but they don't actually know what to do with it, because the thing is that they don't actually love their husbands. Their husbands were they were a means to an end. And it's clear in the play that, when the Duke of Cornwall is killed by a servant, Regan doesn't bat an eye. She's actually eyeing up Edmund, for one reason or another. Who knows? But as soon as her husband is dead, but the body's not even cold yet, and she basically says to him, you can have my army, you can have my share of the kingdom, you can have everything, you can be my lord and master, he says. And that's kind of, that they are actually still quite young. They're not quite as young as Cordelia, but you see in this that they actually don't know what to do with the power once they get it. So they got rid of Lear. They got his power. They don't like their husbands. They don't actually know what they want. And so you're kind of left with this idea that, that you better have a plan for something once you get it, because if you don't, that's, it puts you in danger. And the other thing is political, as I was saying, political leaders are, they just believe bullshit, is that Gloucester is easily fooled by Edmund's fake letter. You believe this uncritically. You didn't ask him anything. You didn't say anything. You just flew off the handle. Edmund obviously, if there's something missing there, you think, is this like my son to just plot my death? That he can't wait for me to be dead so he can become the Earl of Gloucester, which is sort of like a mid-level noble. The irony is that Gloucester ends up, Edgar ends up being king at the end of the play. So, do with that what you will. But the thing is that Gloucester, the original Earl of Gloucester, Edgar's father, doesn't really think about anything. He just reacts. So you see these political leaders reacting to the situation rather than sitting down there and thinking, okay, does this make sense that my son wants to kill me? Does my bastard son ever brood over the fact that he's a bastard? You have to consider people's motivations when they're doing something in order to understand what they're going after. Another thing is that there's a load of bad choices. Obviously, Regan and Goneril have run their father out. They plot against their husbands and only try, they basically only try to hand over power to Edmund, who I don't know that they know him that well. It seems like they don't even think things through. And obviously, Lear didn't think things through. He doesn't know who his daughters are. Why would you give them all this power if you don't know how they'll use it? If their kingdom is so important to you, you have to put it in the best hand. Fine, you could find a regent like they've done did in England in the early 1800s. But to put it into a 20-year-old's hands is just something's not right there. So anyway, one of the things about the play I have found very interesting is that you see Lear as just this old man. He kind of drifts in and out of rage and insanity, but he also has, when reality kind of shows up and he sees somebody that he loves, like Cordelia, he snaps out of it. He really does snap out of it. That when he's sitting there on a bed, and Cordelia comes to him, he's not insane. It's just that he realizes that the one person who was nice to him and deserves his love and admiration, it kind of clicks with him. But when he's thrown out of Regan's house, when he's thrown out of the Goneril's house, and he's thrown out of the Earl of Gloucester's house, he just goes nuts. And so he was never quite there to begin with. You can see the age kind of. He just, in one scene, he sees Tom, who is Edgar in disguise. He sees Tom naked as a jaybird, and he says, "Look at that guy. He's free. He doesn't have to deal with all this crap I have to deal with." And he just rips off his clothes and starts wandering around in the middle of a storm, raging at the sky. "Come on, give me the best. This is the best you can do." That kind of thing. Obviously the guy's not playing with a full deck of cards there, and so he's kind of a fun character. It completely sad, but it is fun to see him scream at the sky. We've all been there, and sometimes we have felt like we've been losing our minds. But I don't know that that it's the best way to handle things. He is to blame for a lot of his own problems, that he's just not capable of dealing with them because he's old and foolish. And the other character I think is very interesting, and I guess I'll just end with it, is the Fool. So I did talk about the Fool, that he's essentially allowed to say things no one else is allowed to say. It's just that he's a bit of a medieval Cassandra in this play, where Cassandra was one of the princesses of Troy, and I believe it was Apollo who fell in love with her, and as a sort of wedding present, or a pre-wedding present, like a fiancé present, he gave her the power of prophecy. And she was only 13, 14, and as 13 or 14-year-old girls are want to do, anybody who's been around them knows that they're on to this thing and then they're on to the next thing, 2 minutes later. She changes her mind. She doesn't want to know about Apollo. And there's a thing with the gods, is that they can't take back the gifts that they give you, but they can warp the gifts to the point where they're now a curse. And so while Cassandra has the gift of prophecy and Apollo can never take that away from her, he then makes her sort of enchanted to the point where no one will ever believe her. So she gives out these prophecies that not only does no one listen, people believe the opposite is true. And so she's a tragic figure in this. And the Fool is a bit like that, where he's allowed to say these things, but no one pays any attention. He's just some idiot in clown makeup. And he actually makes a prophecy here, which is kind of interesting. So this is in Act 3, Scene 3. When they're out in the middle of the storm, and King Lear is about to lose his mind, the fool says, I'll speak a prophecy ere I go, when priests are more in word than matter, when brewers mar their malt with water, when nobles are their tailors' tutors, no heretics burn but wenches' suitors, when every case in law is right, no squire in debt, no nor or knight, when slanders do not live in tongue, nor cut purses not come to throngs. Shakespeare, so you kind of have to think about it for a bit. When usurers tell the golden field, and bawds and whores do churches build, then shall the realm of Albion, which is England, come to great confusion. Then comes the time who lives to see it, that going shall be used with feet. This prophecy shall make Merlin make. This prophecy Merlin shall make. For I lived before his time. It's interesting. So anyway, he basically is saying when up is down, bad is good, good is bad. When you get you put the cart before the horse, the whole kingdom's in trouble, and no one hears him. He's alone on the stage with giving this prophecy, and even if he was surrounded by the entire cast, no one would listen. He's just an entertainment thing, but that's King Lear in a nutshell. Now, this is hardly the definitive critique or analysis, but I thought I'd have a little go, and you can only, the beginning of every 1,000-mile march has to start with a single step. So that's about all, and I will see you in another video. See you soon!